nothing is the same anymore. And we're all trying to fit into our old lives that aren't the same. And there's a layer of grief that comes from that. There's grief of lost dreams, or maybe you're in a place right now in your life that you thought would be different, but you don't have control over the situation. And so you grieve what you wished it was. There's so many different layers that actually have nothing to do with death. Of course, we know that death brings a lot of grief. And to anyone who's listening who has felt that or is going through that, I want to honor that for you, because grief through death is so hard to go through, and there are so many other ways that grief enters our lives as well.
You know, this safe is in a research lab, and one of the things that I've noticed over the pandemic, and thank you for bringing that up, is that we are told to move on. We're told that this happened between 2020 and 2021. Get over it, move on. And I think it's some people's way of not acknowledging something painful, but many of us feel like things don't feel the same. Things are forever changed. And I'm just waiting for there to be some type of monument on like how we have like Veterans Day and 9/11 and so forth. We need one for the pandemic, because many of us don't feel the same, and we shouldn't, and we need to acknowledge that. One of the things that you brought up was validating your grief experience. So tell us about that as being the first step to your grieving process and healing.
Yes. Oh, I love that you just brought that up, because there's one thing that most humans don't do throughout their entire life that hurts us more than anything else, and that is not acknowledging our grief. In grief, what we know is the first step that we need towards healing is to acknowledge or validate what we've gone through. Until we've done that, it's really hard to find the tools and support that we need to move forward. It's really hard to put words to how we're feeling, because the opposite of validating is doing things like numbing ourselves, working more. For me, my big thing during my grief was to try to work and run away as fast as I could to avoid. So if we're not acknowledging, we're avoiding. And when we enter this space of avoidance, it becomes really easy to lose ourselves. Grief unexpressed shows up in some place. And I know from what grief has told us in research and my own personal experience is that we have to give ourselves safe spaces to allow it to come out so it doesn't come out in other ways. So then the question is, well, what does acknowledgement look like? How do we acknowledge our grief, right? Because I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to feel this way, but we have to understand what it is that we are feeling. And maybe we're reacting really strongly to someone or a situation, but under that reaction is a layer of grief that we haven't dealt with. Being able to get to a place in our life where we can check in with our emotions and validate that we've gone through something really hard can actually open up a really beautiful path forward. And it's easier said than done, right? Because you could be like, well, that sounds easy. I'm just going to acknowledge that I don't feel good. But we haven't been taught to do that. And we haven't been told it's okay to do that. We've been told to move on. We've been told to get over it. We've been told to suck it up. Those are messages that we have heard all growing up, most of us at least. And so then society as a whole, when we enter into a hard season, it's hard when we're not being validated by other people to somehow figure out how to validate ourselves.